Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Xsolla's Helping Developers Work with Influencers Diamond Club panel. My name is Cricket Carlson, and I will be facilitating and moderating the panel this afternoon. Now, if you're new here today, this is a very special kickoff to Xsolla's Diamond Club. To get access to more speaker series events, as well as all sorts of other goodies like free and discounted tickets to trade shows and members only networking social activities, you're going to want to check out the link below, and that's xsolla.live/DC. There's so many familiar faces on this panel today, and most of them need no introduction. But if you are new to the game space, I'm going to go ahead and familiarize yourself with who we've got sitting here today. Today, we have joining us Alana Pierce, and Alana is regarded as one of the top industry journalists in games. She's also a host, a producer, an influencer, and is now writing with Sony Santa Monica Studios. Alana, welcome.
Thank you. Do want to clarify, working for Sony means I haven't been a journalist for 3 years. That would be mad unethical. But thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next, we have Brandon Stennis, a partnered streamer, content creator, and influencer relations manager with Reverb Games. How are you today, Brandon? It's so
Hi.
good to see you.
Good to see you. I'm
Welcome.
really excited to be here. So thank you so much for having me. So hopefully we can talk about some really good stuff today.
I can't wait.
Yes.
Next, we have Clara Sia, who has been working on the agency side of influencer strategy for several years now and is currently the influencer strategist with Devolver Digital. When Claire is not being an influencer strategist, she is championing small indies on Twitch, where she is a partnered streamer. Welcome today, Clara.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm
excited
so
to be
excited
here.
to see you.
Mhm.
Next, we have Mike Prasad, who is the founder and CEO of Tiny Sponsor, a marketing place for the fast-growing micro influencer market. He is also the founder of the Marketing Club on Clubhouse and focuses on helping brands and creators succeed. Welcome today, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's get started. What the heck is an influencer? No one seems to know what an influencer is. If I talk to 3 different people, I'm going to get 3 different answers on what an influencer is. Mike, let's start with you.
I think it's pretty simple. If you are someone who creates content and has an audience, and that audience interacts with you, to me, that's a definite influencer. It doesn't matter what size or platform you're on. It's just basically, we define it as, do you create content and then do you have an audience that follows you for that content? And that's the simplest definition that I have. And for us, that means it could be small, it could be large, it could be any channel. It doesn't have to be digital. But as long as you fit into those 2-point definition, that's basically good enough for us, because then that allows us to work with you to create opportunities for both the creator and brand.
Now, Alana, as an influencer in your own right, I would love to see what your idea of an influencer is.
Again, like you said, a million definitions. I don't feel confident about this. I feel like Mike would know better. But what I tend to land on is if you're someone who gets any kind of product for free. If you get codes, if you get free stuff, you have crossed the barrier of just someone who uses Twitter and have become an influencer, because that is, a company acknowledging that they want your voice talking about their thing. So that's generally how I define it, which means it does include a whole lot of people who would maybe otherwise disclude themselves. But if you're getting something for free, there's a reason for that.
There's a reason for that. Okay. So another question is there's all sorts of different words and jargon and vernacular that is included in the influencer space. What the heck is an activation? What the heck is a re-engagement campaign or a bounty campaign? What do these things mean? Clara, would you mind kicking this conversation off?
Oh my goodness. Well, an activation is really anytime you, I would say, purposefully and specifically activate an influencer. It's an activation. So there's typically some sort of contractual agreement where they're paid in exchange for some type of coverage, a live stream, a video, a social post, a hosting gig, an appearance at an event or something. And there's just a lot of considerations that go into what kind of campaign to run. There's reactivation, as you mentioned, and when those things hit, how you roll that across changes the terms sometimes. But for the most part, if you're engaging an influencer, there's some sort of an exchange, whether it's money or it's in-kind stuff in exchange for their coverage. That's an activation. And I think that's mostly what you need to know, that and campaigning. Everything else, I believe in plain language, to be honest, because from the agency side, I dealt with studios of all sizes who knew what Twitch was or didn't know what Twitch was, who knew what YouTube was and seriously did not know what YouTube was. So I believe in speaking in plain terms. And if you're working with anyone who is not willing to do that for you, switch agencies, switch whoever it is that you're working with. But I think that's, and then there's like, bounties and whatnot. Again, those are all sort of platform relevant. And if you have someone who knows what they're doing, they can explain it to you in language that you can understand. I don't know if that's helpful at all to you.
No, that's great. And actually, I would love to know, Brandon, what you think, because you also have this really unique perspective where you do work on that agency side. You are an influencer relations manager, but you're also a streamer. So, um, what's your take on it? What is an activation? What kind of activations do you commonly work with when you're reaching out to influencers?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with what Claire said. When we work on activations with streamers, it's usually like there's a gaming launch that's happening, and we need some streamers to promote it or YouTubers. So you reach out to them to do a paid promotion and to promote on their social media and all that kind of stuff in exchange for giving us the marketing and promotion for the game that we're trying to promote.
That's excellent. Thank you. Mike, what kind of combination of these campaigns are you utilizing right now with Tiny Sponsor?
So, all the different formats essentially mentioned are formats that we work with. We actually do the self-serve where creators are selling on our platform. We do the one where we manage as well. And we've managed that for a lot of creators, or for a lot of brands, I'm sorry. And so basically, our look at is that creators engage with their audience a lot of different ways. And there's a lot of different ways for brands to take advantage of that. So whether it's introducing a product for visibility, it's driving a purchase or a download or an action, or storytelling, or building an audience. And these are all different uses of influencer marketing. And the different formats, depending on the platform, can be used in different ways. So for Twitch, you might have a live stream. For Instagram, you might have a story or a post, and all of those will serve different goals. So I think from our point of view, a creator can offer the engagements with their content that is best for them, and then a brand should be using it based on the use case that, one, fits the brand's needs, but two, also matches a format that the creator can offer. And then those vary depending on the goals. So a simple example would be an Instagram story is really good for a conversion or a download, let's say for gaming, whereas an Instagram feed post or a video might be better for storytelling, introing the game, showing the game mechanics. So they're going to have different purposes depending on that format.
Thank you. So we kind of know what we want to work with. Maybe we are launching a game and we want to start a new campaign. Maybe we're just getting started. Where do we get started with that conversation now with an influencer? Do we approach them directly? When do we go to an agent or another third party? What does that look like today? And how do you know how to start that conversation with an influencer? If you don't mind kicking this off, Clara.
I'm sorry, when do we know when to early, right away? That should be one of the first things that you think about. I mean, it's part of marketing. One of the worst things that happened with, launching any games or doing any sort of activations with clients before was, we have 2 weeks and we're launching. What can you do for us? And depending on whether or not we sign them, hopefully, usually not, but every once in a while it happens. There's not as much you can do. So you want to engage either if you're doing it yourself, which is totally fine, and you want to engage early, start your Discord servers early, build that hype early, get your social team going. If you don't have a social team and you don't know what you're doing, hire one. It is extremely important. Influencers that are not making content are living on social media platforms. So you want to engage with them early and often and get someone who knows how to speak their language. Immerse yourself in the culture of content creation. There is a culture and a language that comes with speaking to these folks. And then also just constantly remind influencers that you're there, that you're developing, and that it's something that they want to be part of when it comes. So keep in mind that influencers chase viewership as well, right? Like that is their primary goal, is to how do I feed my viewership? And so they'll go after things with hype, they'll go after things with communities. And when I say Discord, for instance, is tying into that, I'm not saying you're creating a Discord server so that influencers can join and talk to you all the time. That's almost never going to happen, especially with the big influencers. They don't have the time. But you want to build a community and have people talking. they will chase that buzz, and that hype is going to go, hey, wait, if I'm part of this, will that build my viewership? So it's a mutual relationship, a mutual benefits relationship, where if you're building something that they want to be a part of, then they will help you build that as well. So make sure that you are talking early and engaging early.
So it sounds like it's a lot of creating value, not just for the developer, but also making sure that whatever you're pitching is bringing value to the influencer.
Absolutely. Not everyone's going to have budget, but and if you don't, you need to create that value in every other way, whether it's early access to things, exclusive stuff, in-kind things. Merch is a whole different. I'm not going to talk about merch because I have a lot of opinions on merch, but there are a lot of things that you can do to add value to them, and building your own partnerships as well, and creating opportunities for influencers. For instance, securing Twitch front page rotation. Who wants to be part of that for your game, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Now, Brandon, I'm going to ask this. Do you go first to the influencer? Do you dig up that email address and approach it that way? What if they have an agent? What if there's another third party that's representing? What does this landscape look like? And when you are trying to go after an influencer, where do you start?
It's always an interesting way of doing it because it always depends on the game and the client. Usually I have a big list of streamers who have signed up for our mailing list and like let us know what kind of games that they like to play, and to reach out to them for different information. But when it comes to different clients we have, like I do research on each streamer that we are thinking about who would be good for our client. So I do research a little on, and then I personally do reach out to them, or if they have an agent, usually, right away, if there's an agency or if it's someone just like directly talking to them. But it's definitely important to have that personal touch, and it's not just like a blanket email where it's like, hey, I really love your content. Let's work together. And it's nothing, it's just blank and that's it. People and like influencers love to have that personal touch. And if you actually know them and what their content is about, they're more prone to work with you. And as an influencer myself, I really work with people who know my content, who have seen it before, and I'm fit the opportunity that they're looking for. So starting that research really early on is really helpful, so you don't run into those crunches, because I hate trying to do crunching like towards the last minute, because there's all sorts of things going on when the game is launching. But yeah, just reaching out to them and just making sure that if there is an agent, making sure that they know all the requirements that you're needing and if it fits for your product.
Gonna say, I've gotten so many emails that read like they're copy pasted in some
Yeah.
cases that seem like they're spam,
Mhm.
because they're like, hi, we love your content.
Yep.
And like there's no detail whatsoever. And I will dismiss those immediately. Like obviously I have a inbox that goes directly to my manager that I can also read. And that's generally how any offers for any of this kind of stuff comes to me. And I definitely appreciate when people go to my manager rather than me, unless it's a friend. And then I'm like, we'll get you a good rate though. So that like makes it a whole other back channel. But if someone comes to me, I'm always just going to be like, hey, the email address is listed here publicly for a reason. Please use the email address. But yeah, as soon as it reads like it's been to 20 other people, I kind of assume it's not legit. Like it's a really bad look when someone wants to work with you just to sell a product. Like it really is just marketing and it's not a relationship. I think that's a really bad way to start.
Yeah, I think that on that note, context is everything, right? Like the brand should understand why they're using an influencer specifically, and that specific influencer, because it's what they're using that influencer, working with them because of what that influencer specifically does. And if it specifically matches what the game's about, then it's a really, really great match. It's a win-win. When the brand has not taken the time to understand who they're working with, then that's when you have these issues. And so the context on both sides of that equation are absolutely important.
Thank you. Now, there is a lot of debate around the power of an influencer depending upon their size and reach right now. We see that there are a lot of people who are really excited to get into content creation. What advice do you have regarding working with any combination of macro, medium, or micro influencers? Is it worth casting a wide net to get as many people in as possible? Or do you want to be very targeted in your approach and maybe chase down that big name talent? And let's actually go ahead and kick it off with you, Mike.
I'll say it depends. Like, generally speaking, right, the bigger the influencer, the broader their audience. So think of it as a billboard versus like like me talking to you, saying, "Hey, I know you like this specific thing. I trust you for these things." So as the audience gets larger, in 99.9% of the cases, it becomes a broader audience. Now, a brand's going to have specific goals. So, for example, if I'm working with a brand that's like, let's say I'm working with Blizzard and everyone kind of knows World of Warcraft, I'm probably going to go for a bigger influencer because at that point I don't need to say what World of Warcraft is. I need to go make sure everyone sees whatever my announcement is. And so I might go for a larger influence in that case. In the case of another company that we work with, that was an indie game dev, and they had a game launch, and they have a very unique game experience, a very specific audience they're targeting. That was way better to go with lots of smaller creators that had the matching specific audience that would appreciate that certain type of game, that game mechanic, that narrative style. And so for that, we work with about 10 or 20 smaller, actually, I think it's 16 smaller creators that were mostly streamers that had maybe under 100 concurrents. And the idea behind that is that these are people that really loved indie games, their audience followed and loved to try out new indie games. And they specifically focus on the game mechanics of the specific game. And so that preciseness, that targeting was really, really effective in turning a conversion there versus a broad visibility. And so when you're looking at sizing of an influencer, you really got to think about it's basically matching the targeting. What is the targeting you care about? And depending on that, that's going to dictate what the type of size influencer you want. Now, we always recommend starting with a group of smaller influencers to test out targeting, test out your messaging, test out your relationship, and make sure it is a good match. Then, as you establish that and you establish your conversion funnel, let's say like where the content is directing to and all that good stuff, then you can work with a larger influencer and start stepping up. So maybe then in the end, you end up having one large influencer, let's say a couple of medium influencers and a lot of smaller influencers at the end point, but you step up to that over time.
I
Got
definitely want
it.
to echo that. And also like don't forget there are nano and pico influencers
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
But I would 100% want to echo what Mike said. I think almost always it's worthwhile to include influencers of all levels and really diversify. You got the big folks like bringing up visibility, the broader audience and the numbers. And that's very valuable. Don't get me wrong, it generates your buzz. But then you got your, quote unquote tier 2s and 3s and lower. And they have typically more dedicated audiences, higher conversions, and they're a little more concerned with like pleasing the contract and that sort of thing. And if there are any influencers listening out there, you want to be right in the middle in that Venn diagram of having that audience and having high conversion, high engagement. So the numbers and the clout and those are the real tastemakers. Those are the ones that are on everyone's list. And you'll see these names in Steam reviews all the time. For instance, like I bought this game after watching so and so play it. Those are the people that are the true taste makers out there.
Yeah, and just for a good example that I noticed in a really big way is that when the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 were coming out, I did notice that when they did send out review copies to influencers, it was a good mix of regular influencers, different size influencers. So we were getting different like aspects that we usually don't get. So it's good to see that they're looking at different numbers and giving chances to people who may not have gotten that opportunity to receive a console before, but now they're looking at you as you are creating an audience and you have a community who is willing to see you try our games on our console. So make sure you understand that. As a friend has said, impact over numbers is always a good thing. So you don't have to have 1 million followers to make an impact on the world or in this industry. As long as you have a good community behind you, you can definitely make a difference.
And I think that the Xbox and PlayStation launches were also really interesting because they definitely focused, at least more than I've seen in the past, on actually having diverse creators, which generally
Yep.
doesn't happen. So like
Yeah.
they were intentionally working with people from the Black community and people from the LGBT community, like people who are really the front facing gaming creators in those spaces, to make sure that I'm sure those people have really high conversion rates for their audiences too, but to make sure those audiences were represented. For me, that was just really cool to see. That was like, oh hell yeah, these people are being included as well, even if their followers are smaller. But then when you think about it, yeah, if this Black woman is getting this Xbox, she's showing it to a bunch of other Black women, and that's a market that might otherwise be completely missed if you're sending it to the same slew of just white gamers all over again. So I thought that one was unusual because we don't tend to see as much of a drive to do that, but it was really cool to see that growth in that space for sure.
Yeah.
That is a really, really great point. And that's actually something that I do want to bring up today in this talk. It's a very, very hot theme right now. A big conversation from influencers from diverse and marginalized communities has been the difficulty of just finding those opportunities to participate in campaigns with brands, and not just big name brands, but even some of the smaller brands out there. It's part of a larger problem that we're seeing where there's a lack of representation of marginalized communities in mass media. How can developers and publishers be authentic and meaningful partners to these communities? Brandon, if you don't mind, I'm going to
Yeah,
start with
yeah.
you.
I could definitely say there is definitely some great creators who are out there in the marginalized community who obviously I know, but just it's about doing the research and finding it. It's not
Mm.
that we don't exist or we're not there. It's just actually doing the research and trying to find those creators. There's Twitch that has Black History Month. There's tons of creators that are showcased and highlighted in those kind of things. So it's good to pay attention to even going back after February and like finding those lists that's on Twitch's website through Google. You can even find those creators that kind of way. So it's really important to have somebody who understands and knows about the marginalized communities that are not being represented, and then doing the research to find those creators. Because when you think about it, it's very like you have to be very sensitive of we don't hear a lot from companies, and to make sure that you're doing it in a real genuine way where it doesn't come off as we're just trying to fill a gap.
Right. And that's a huge concern,
Hmm.
authenticity and being genuine.
Yeah.
Clara, could you weigh in on this?
Sure. 100 reach out simply. That,
Yeah.
as Brandon mentioned, people of color, women, and LGBTQ disabled creators, they don't get reached out to very often. So simply reaching out is already a huge step. Reach out on social, reach out to their agencies. I reach out to agencies to when I need to get fingers, because I'm only one person and I can only see watch so many things at one time. But I'll specifically even reach out to all these agencies, say, hey, do you have anyone that fits this this description? And it's really just like not white male gamers, straight white cis viewer that plays these kinds of games, that has this type of viewership, that sort of thing. So get help. I would say also join diversity programs in the gaming space, participate in mentorship programs. I've been on a lot of panels that specifically target helping Black creators in the background, and Asian creators, and helping LGBTQIA plus creators make themselves known and protect themselves from toxicity, that things like that. So really immersing yourself, like I said before, immerse yourself in the culture, be a part of benefiting them, so that they want to also, you're showing goodwill, good faith, and an interest in their growth and their representation. And also to hire underrepresented people in your organization. So marginalized people are some big number percentage more likely to apply to organizations and initiatives and campaigns that already have people that include people like them. So if you have, look at your crew, if they're all cis straight white men, maybe consider hiring someone who has that perspective, and so that other people feel more comfortable approaching you as well.
And don't wait for them to reply for that kind of thing. Like, this is
Hmm.
slightly off topic, but I'm always like, it's not an excuse. There's outreach, and
Yeah.
I've worked with plenty of companies that come to me. Like, I do a lot of help with IGN organizing their charity streams, and they're currently organizing one for Stop AAP I Hate, and I effectively just try to help brands find content creators who are not just white people. And a lot of that has to be you approaching them and reaching out to them. You can't just expect them to apply and be like, well, none of them applied. It's like, well, that could be because you haven't created an environment where they think they can apply. Like, it is in some cases helpful for people to have lists, to have a list of this kind of creator, of this kind of creator. And that could seem like you're putting them in a box, but it's just such an effective way to find the right people to reach out to have a starting point, then go there to figure out what their content is, like we were saying, to make sure they're the right match, to they play the games that you're trying to promote. But it's definitely something that I think people need to put effort into and shouldn't just expect to come to them.
I do also want to, there's a really fine line, because I something I tweeted about last year, a few months ago or weeks ago, is last year I declined no fewer than 6 opportunities to be on panels and discussions because the approach was wrong. So yes, there is, some ticking of boxes and things like that. Inclusion, we're at, a transition point right now. It's awkward.
But Clara,
For a
we
lot of
need an
people.
Asian woman.
Exactly.
And do
It's
it.
like, oh, we just needed a non-white person on this panel. Oh, we just needed a woman on the panel. Like, okay, no, thank you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a fine line between inclusion and wanting to include, that desire, genuine desire, and tokenism. And you want to make sure you educate yourself on how to communicate effectively to avoid something like that, and to keep diversity in mind from the get-go, and not just to tick a box.
And it seems to me like in being authentic and developing that relationship with influencers and people that you are courting to come participate in your brand or your product or whatever your promotion is, it takes a degree of trust and feeling comfortable with that brand and that opportunity. Alana, can I ask you this? What are things that a brand can do to make you feel comfortable with them in things that um, that help build trust in your mind?
I'm really specific, I think, when I do any kind of influencer work. And I think that's the thing that the minute that I feel like there's pushback on my specifics, then I'm going to be like, you don't care about this and you just want money. So, like, for me to do an Instagram feed post, my rate is infinitely higher because my Instagram feed is so specific and in a really stupid way. I just really like posting personal content that is very reflective of where I'm at the time or what I'm thinking at any given time. So the minute that I throw an ad in there that doesn't fit that, I'm like, I don't like this. This is not what my brand is. This is not what I've been doing on this platform for the last 7 years. So I'm very against that. And if there's no way for me to change that content to make it fit or to make it something that I would enjoy, that I would want to post there, and there's no like, well, could we maybe do like an extra amount of stories instead, or could we do like more tweets instead of having this feed post, or can we find a way to make the feed post something that I would want to say or something that I would want to post? Then I'm probably not going to work with that brand again. But I will say one of my biggest pet peeves doing any kind of influencer work is when people, you submit something for them to approve, and then they give you notes the day before publish. And I'm like, why are you not giving me notes before then? You had this 5 days ago. And I feel like it happens so often and is so difficult because every person who works in the content creation space generally is doing a million things. You know, not only do I have a full-time job, but I also stream and make YouTube videos and have all of these different things that I'm doing, that if you give me notes at the last minute and because it's in the contract, you're like, you have to publish tomorrow, like, this is just disrespectful. Like, you can't do that. And it's so frequent. So for me, it's a huge thing of just, please, if you're going to give notes on anything that you want me to publish, try to give me a little bit of time on that. But yeah, like I said, I'm very specific about making sure I cater what I'm doing to something that I would authentically say. And I like to have a back and forth there. And I definitely won't trust a brand if they're really just trying to force, like, no, this is exactly what we want you to do. That's our only term. I'm like, cool, then I will pass. Then I don't want to work with you. And that's okay too.
So compromise, really, and making sure that they are invested in what's important to you.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, what about you? Is there anything that you consider when working with influencers to help build that type of trust?
Yeah, I mean, really going on what Alana said, it's a collaboration. That's why you're working with an influencer. If you just want like visibility and you just want to drive a click, go buy some banner ads. Like, it's going to be cheaper. It's going to get your job done. The reason why you're working with the influencer is because they do something unique, or they have a unique perspective or content that you are working with them for that reason. So the brand really has to look at it as a collaboration. And from that point of view, it's generally speaking, we tell a brand to build a brief about what their key points are, what their messaging is. And if there's anything that has to be said verbatim, they need to identify that up front. And then the idea is, at that point, those guidelines go to the creator, and then the creator should be able to reinterpret it the way they think is fit for their audience and their content to make it something that does make sense in their feed, for example. And the brand should be comfortable with that idea going into the relationship. And in most part, we strongly discourage any dictation. And so the only thing that we ever say is, don't dictate what the creator is going to say. Give them guidelines, tell them what your goals are, let them know what the outcome should be. Like, you want them, they want the audience to do X, Y, and Z, but let the creator define how that happens, because that's what's going to have the best results. Because ultimately, you're going to the creator for their audience, and they know their audience better than anybody else.
That's so beautifully put. I love that. Talking about authenticity on the brand side, let the creator be authentic and use their own voice. I love that. That's fantastic advice. Now, this is a question that's a little bit scarier because I'm going to ask you to talk numbers, and nobody ever likes talking numbers in this industry. But let's open up the conversation. One of the big mysteries of designing an influencer program is understanding the costs associated with project-based. Maybe it's short term, maybe it's long term influencer programs. Fair compensation is really, really important in the space right now. And it could be really, really difficult to navigate if you're a smaller studio, even if you're a AAA studio. I think I know a lot of people from AAAs who've asked me, what do I pay for a campaign like this? How do you approach negotiating influencer contracts? Are there any ethical considerations that come along with that? Claire, do you mind starting this conversation
Oh
off?
my god, how much time do we have? It's so big. Well, I mean, if you're paying for an influencer, first of all, ethically, I want to put out that and I hope I'm speaking for most people, as you're paying for their time and the priority in covering your game over others, and any other specific marketing deliverables, like for instance a tracking link or a social post or that sort of thing. But you're not paying for their interest. They have to genuinely want to play your game in the first place, and maybe you just want them to play at a certain time to coincide with a launch or a major DLC or some other PRV. So most studios, particularly indies, they'll wrap their influencer marketing budgets around those major beats like launches, sales, console ports, whatever makes the most sense, wherever you feel like you want to make some sort of a marketing impact. There are some baselines to start with, and I really hesitate to say this because there are so many qualitative factors. So depending on who you talk to, they'll maybe say, I don't know, like on Twitch, $1 per concurrent viewer per hour, per whatever, or 1.5 or point, or even like 10 cents per viewer on or was it a million? I can't remember. I literally have to have a spreadsheet because it's constantly changing, and I don't even really use it anymore because it is so qualitative. They might have really strong social reach. The type of content they create will be more suited, for instance, highly edited content versus unedited content. That's worth way more on YouTube. Live content that has really high engagement and they're really, really accustomed to doing deliverables and hitting talking points. Collaborative content, sketches, animations. I mean, there's just so many things that go into creating a rate and a budget for this. And then on top of that, there's administrative fees if they work with agencies and have managers and things like that. So you may also pricing models that differ between campaigns that are like maybe a straight ad buy or an ad read. But for the most part, you're negotiating flat rates by package of deliverables. So for instance, X dollars for X number of hours streamed with a couple social posts, a tracking link, that sort of thing. And part of the reason is they don't want to feel too markety themselves. They don't want to be like, oh, for this many views, this many concurrents, I'll get paid this much. That's more like a bounty board sort of a thing, which I have many opinions on. And I'm not going to talk on that right now. But so for the most part, you're doing package deals, like flat rates, and then you're getting this amount, and then what happens, you monitor, you measure, and then you decide, was that worth it? What's the ROI on that, and do I work with them again? And then you adjust for next time, do A/B testing, all that stuff. That's just kind of like straight marketing whatnots. But always have a legal contract. Don't forget your early adopters. New user acquisition, super sexy, but you want to keep in mind and reward the folks that support your game from day one. It builds affinity. You're almost guaranteed positive reviews, and you build that goodwill. It's super important. You don't want to leave them in the dust. And it also helps to encourage other people for other games and initiatives that you launch. Like, hey, if I'm part of this early on and I support them, maybe they'll notice me and then reward me for that. You want to be part of that culture and not just the like chasing the numbers. I can talk forever on this, so I'm going to just that'll be my piece right there.
Thank
I
you.
mean,
That was exceptional. Go ahead.
I could offer a couple of breakdowns. So there's going to be market pricing, which is generally what the general rate is depending on the platform and depending on the deliverable. It is going to be different per platform and different per deliverable. So for Twitch, as an example, we're seeing anywhere from 40 to 80 cents per concurrent viewer per hour. Now, that said, a lot that can contextualize based on essentially who the audience is, what the creator is doing in the stream, what type of engagement is it a shout out or is it actually a dedicated stream? All that are variables into that pricing. Now, if you think about it from a brand point of view, you really got to consider multiple areas of value. So the first part is what is their base media value for the exposure they're giving you. What would you pay for equivalent exposure in a banner ad or a pre-roll, whatever? And there's a base cost there. And that's going to be a lot if it's like a dedicated stream, or less if it's going to be just, hey, I'm going to do a pre-roll or a shout out. And you can map that to what you would pay for other media. And then the other value is going to be, what is the value of their content creation? So what are they doing? What are they creating? And the time put into that. And that's time value as a content creator. And then there's going to be, what is the value of their endorsement and their what value they convey as someone representing the game in this case. And then there's a value there. And those are all how you set your minimum values. And it creates to think about it the same way, because at that point, you can't deny that there's value there, and that should be serving as a minimum. And then at that point, typically speaking, it's going to be, is there additional usage? on the content. Like let's say that footage is going to be repurposed. There's the usage value there. And then beyond that, it's going to be the targeting. Is their audience? Who is their audience? What is the value of that audience? What is the nature of the industry? So for example, in the music industry, the average media values in the music industry are lower than if you look at something like high-end jewelry, the average value for targeted audience is higher. And so there's a modifier, a multiplier to all those. So you basically add those four things up, and then there's an industry multiplier that comes into it. And that's really how we get the baselines for what someone should be paid. Now, beyond that, it becomes some level of market dynamics. So sometimes you'll see some dynamics. So for example, dads on Instagram. It's like a super specific niche. There's not many of them. They command a higher multiple, for example, because they're brand safe typically, and they're a smaller available supply. So the market dynamic that's a little bit overpriced compared to anything else outside of those factors. But it is a mixture of qualitative and quantitative measures.
Can I ask how you approach, because this is, I think, very relevant to the kind of content I make, like looking at a content creator who has a huge view disparity based on the kind of content they make. Like if I make an edited Let's Play, that might get 30,000 views. If I do a spoken to camera kind of editorial video, that could get 50,000. Podcast could get 70,000. A Q&A will get 100,000. How do you like look at something like that? And that happens for streams with me too, depends on the game that I stream or who I'm streaming with. Like how do you look at those numbers and see a huge disparity and then figure out what kind of numbers you're going to get?
Because they're different formats. So like within your channel, right, those different formats have different types of engagement. That's natural for every creator. So every type of creator is typically going to have 3 to 5 formats they create, whether it's on Twitch, whether it's on Instagram. So most people think about it as, oh, I do this type of stream, like you said, a Let's Play versus a Q&A. And each of those are, from our point of view, packages that you offer to a brand.
Interesting.
So like, I'm not saying, hey, sponsor my stream. I'm saying, I do the stream. I do Let's Plays. I do QAs. I do this other thing. And those had different deliverables, different expectations, and different formats. And the way the brand integrates into those are slightly different as well. And so they're going to be priced differently.
So it's like you're sponsoring a product from the influencer rather than the influencer's entire channel is kind of the approach.
That's exactly how it should be done, in my opinion. It's how we built our site. So like on our website, compared to like other places where it's like, oh, I'm an influencer. Here's my channel link. Here's what I do. We do that too, but we go a step further and say, great, influencer, what do you sell? Think of it as like e-commerce store, like or an Etsy store is the way I analogize it. It's what are the things that you create specifically that can then be purchased or sponsored. And so we'll ask you to create the packages, and the packages is something specific. So it would be like a Let's Play stream, and that might average 2 hours or maybe 4 hours. It might be a Q&A stream, that might average 1 hour. And so the engagement and the pricing and deliverables and the format will be different, and they're going to serve different purposes. And based on that, a brand will choose the one that best serves what their purpose is. And then it becomes, again, a better match for both sides.
Yeah, I also want to say like a lot of influencers have become wise to this as well, and they're creating these what Instagram I think it was Instagram that started like media kits, but like influencer press kits or influencer buy kits or ad kits or whatever they're calling them these days, where they have these different packages. You know, these are what they also call sponsor opportunities and or sponsorship opportunities, which means I can do social. Be part of social campaigns. I can do live stream campaigns. I can do ad read campaigns, and like these various different types. Sometimes it's just conversation, and I just get excited over which one makes the most sense for the campaign. But more and more influencers are becoming wise to the whole like I have these compartmentalized different products that I can offer within my brand, not just my brand. So yeah,
I think my manager probably has that stuff for me. I've just never seen it. And this is all really interesting from my perspective because you're like shattering the glass on the other side of all this. I'm like, oh, I'd never thought of that. But of course, that's how it works.
There's so
But
much
also-
that goes into it. There's a tremendous amount of nuance. And I think we can dig so far into this. I want to keep looking at this, but I want to approach it from a different angle because Mike brings up a really, really good point. Different platforms, different mediums, different expectations. So if we're trying to vet an influencer and we're looking at the engagement, how do we judge that engagement? What are those tools? I know for some platforms it's concurrent viewership. Brandon, how do we measure engagement with influencers?
Definitely like tracking links is important. I know I've had a few opportunities where it was strictly just Instagram and they were, wanting to focus on like the clicks on and from the bio, and doing some like paid advertisements to see how many people clicked on the ad that I was doing. Some other things would be good. Definitely if someone goes through the link and purchases something as well, that's something measurable. I'm drawing a blank here, so just in case. I'm drawing a blank. feel free to someone else to jump in there. But
Well,
yeah,
there's
the click through is a really good one too, just for social stats and stuff.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. And I am such I shout the praises of the of tracking links all of the
Yeah.
time. Mike, I think you know a lot about this and you've got a lot of insider knowledge that a lot of people have a hard time getting at. What are you looking for? How do you weigh the value of those different numbers?
Yeah, so it's going to be multiple metrics per package because there's different types of engagement, right? You're looking at Twitch, we're looking at average concurrent viewer for sure. We're looking at the format. We're looking also at the insertion, like where is the ad engaged? Is it a dedicated stream where it's like a let's play and it's only that advertiser? Is it other types of things? You might look at recurrence in terms of like the in-stream bot, like how much is it linking out throughout the overall time period? Is it every 15 minutes? Is it every 10 minutes? Then you look at click-throughs. So click-throughs on the link is definitely a big one. It might be like, let's say on like Instagram, it might be taps to the brand's profile, for example. So all that depends on the conversion funnel of the brand that they have in that specific instance. Now, in terms of pricing, it's going to be different as well. So the baseline, let's say on Twitch, is generally going to be concurrent viewership. That's kind of like your broad stroke. Like this is how many people are watching, and then you're going to look at a comparison of that average compared to their follower base, because there's a certain level of visibility you're going to get just from the follower base, but it's going to be much lower value than if that follower base actually tunes in, for example. And so one way I always recommend creators is stack. Like if you have, I'm doing a 2-hour, let's say, let's play stream, include stories on your Instagram that has additional audience that creates additional value. And so then the stories visibility value is going to be added on to the value of the package. And so broadly speaking, you can divide up all the KPIs into, is it a visibility KPI? Is it an action KPI? And then how many times do those trigger essentially across the course of the engagement? So that might be multiple posts, that might be multiple engagements in the stream, and so on and so forth.
Mm. Thank you. I want to shift gears a little bit now. For anyone who's in chat, we are looking at some of the questions from chat, and we are getting to about that point where we're going to start to go into more of a Q&A format. So please don't be shy. If you've got a question, let it out. We're going to go ahead and look over those, and we're going to try to incorporate them here in the last 10 minutes. Here's a big question for everybody. As a developer and publisher may want to diversify their content strategy, there's a growing trend for streamers to do the same thing. And there's all sorts of different intersections in content creation. Let's plays, OnlyFans is a big one that caters more commonly to a more adult audience, adult content. And sometimes that other content may conflict with the core brand or image of a product or of a brand. So what advice do you have for influencers or developers when they are selecting partners who have content that isn't necessarily always reflective of their brand image? Claire, would you mind starting us with off here?
I think I don't know if this is a general opinion for family-friendly IP. I can definitely see G-rated being something that's important, but in practically every other instance, I haven't really seen an issue as long as the other content isn't problematic. We're living in a more enlightened era. If anything, these influencers are diversifying their own content and their audiences for me and saving me work. I wish I had the opportunity to engage with more like cosplayers and animation studios and that sort of thing. But this is more of I think, a personal and a corporate values question. Do you as a studio or CEO find certain topics offensive and you want to distance your brand from them entirely? Do sex work, social activism, cursing bother you? And in general, followers tend to stick with who they follow and the certain types of content that they follow. So by engaging those influencers who maybe some of them might find not brand friendly, you will more likely get access to those creators' followings than other followings digging the stuff about them and then causing problems, if that makes any sense. And then in terms of like vetting them, follow their content, not just the content that in general, like content that that they make sponsored and non-sponsored. Is that how you want your brand to be represented, your game, your launch, etc.? That's mostly what's important. How do they engage with their audiences off camera? on social media? How often do they do it? There's a lot that's wrapped up into it, but I think all the extraneous stuff that they do, if anything, I find it helpful.
Hmm.
Me.
Alana, do you care to weigh in on this?
I think I don't have a lot to note on this except that I've never had a brand ask me not to swear, and as an Australian, I swear a lot. And I have like kind of wondered about that sometimes. Like I will, without being asked, try to make sure if I do a sponsored ad read that's in the middle of a video, not have it immediately after something massively inappropriate. Again, I've never been asked to do that, but I always go, I don't know that they want to be right after this dick joke I just made. Maybe we'll move that around a tiny bit. But I actually think if someone were to approach me and were to say something, trying to change the way that I make content, trying to tell me not to make sexual innuendos in a stupid Let's Play, I probably wouldn't want to work with that brand. I'd ask them to find someone else. But I do also think, for influencers in general, a lot of them do seem to think that they're bulletproof in a lot of cases. Obviously, I come from a media background and I work for a massive corporation. I'm under specific sets of rules across the board, but I think people who just come up as influencers and that's kind of all that they've done can shoot themselves in the foot a lot of the time. And I've seen it happen quite a bit recently on Twitter where people will start fights for engagement because they want the engagement and then not realize how many sponsorship opportunities that they're hurting. So I would say to what Clara just said, if you watch how people talk to other people, like how they talk to their audiences, I think that's a very good read of how they're going to represent your brand, because someone could say something in a year and it could still be associated with you if they seem to have any vitriolic behavior online. I think that's probably something to be more aware of than just the stuff they post on their main feed.
Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick. I just made me think of something like I think brands definitely need to be thinking about like why they're having the influencer be involved with their product and if it fits. Because I remember a situation where I had all the requirements for what they wanted me to talk about and stuff, and like knew the guidelines and stuff, but I ended up having to do an activation over again because I was reading something in chat because someone said the word hell in it. So I read it out loud and I had to completely do the activation over again because it didn't fit with their legal. So I think like, brands just have to make sure that like streamers are people, and like simple, like silly things like that, like reading something for chat shouldn't have to start over again and ruins the experience of like having it be authentic if it's like done again and then, having to redo it just because someone said something. But just understanding how streamers work is really important.
Yeah, what Mike said before was so important. You are
Yeah.
collaborating with them.
Mm-hmm.
You're not dictating to them. You have to trust the influencer's voice. And
Mm-hmm.
if what they gave you isn't what you're looking for, then you didn't do enough research 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
So you just do not ask an influencer to compromise their content, their voice, or their audience.
Mm-hmm.
Their
100%,
audience, their
100%
voice.
agree. Yeah. One thing we do ask is both the influencer, like on our site, will say, hey, can you tell us what your brand safety content types are? So we have a multiple choice list. Is it like politics and strong language, cannabis, sexualized content, stuff like that? And it's a multiple choice list. They choose what someone, if they've done content or the relevant content falls into someone's categories, they'll choose it. When the brand comes up and they'll say, okay, well, what are my brand safety requirements? Do I have any or not?
Mhm.
And then at that point, they'll say, yes, these are these. And then if there's a conflict, we'll say, hey, this creator has this type of content. Either you take them out of your campaign, or you say, hey, I'm okay with that. I'm gonna not worry about that. And at that point, that sets the standard. And so they know they're choosing the creator for who they are. And the brands need to know what those are. And I think creators also should know what they are. And actually one of the things that when I ask a creator, well, what are your brand safety areas? And they're like, what do you mean? And they haven't thought about that. And so that's going to dictate what type of content or what type of brands you can work with, one. And then two, it's a bigger question for the creator to say, like, why does your audience follow you? And the value of that audience is going to also vary depending on those qualitative measures. So someone like I love looking cosplayers. If you have a large male audience and your content is your clothing is female, and most of your male audience is following you, that female clothing is not going to generally sell to that male audience because they're not going to be the ones wearing it. So that's going to mean that your audience might have more males and might be lower value to most brands than, let's say, a more female audience. So that's something to consider as well from the creator point of view.
Thank you, Mike. Now, I've asked a lot of y'all today. I'm going to ask you another delicate question. You go online, you're looking at an influencer's interactions, and you see that maybe they have bad mouthed a brand. Maybe they had a really, really bad experience. Maybe there's some infighting with some other influencers. Is that a red flag? Are we cautious when we approach working with them? Do we pull back from working with influencers? What, as a dev or publisher, do we have to think about when we see that there is maybe something in the way of drama on an influencer's feed? Um, Brandon, do you mind kicking this one off?
Yeah, I think it's very important to read into context sometimes, and also seeing if it's a repeated behavior. If someone is constantly getting into fights with people, that definitely is a turnoff of trying to have a brand represent you. Obviously, with social media, there's going to be a lot of different opinions, but it's very important to read the context and know what's happening, and making sure that has this person been doing this constantly? Will they fit my brand's background and all that kind of stuff? But yeah, just I always have tried to give the benefit of the doubt, but definitely context is important to understand that if it's like someone who's continuously starting issues online with people, it probably is something you should step back from. But also make sure that the influencer is not just like being targeted with harassment, because that happens all the time too, as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Gonna say I like directly insult my friends sometimes. Like, but if you didn't look for the context of that,
Mhm.
you could think it was a fight. Like one of
Yeah.
my best friends is Steve Spawn, who's a very well-known disabled gamer. And I would make jokes to him that I would not want anyone else to make to him because we have that rapport. So if you didn't know and you didn't look into the context of me being very good friends with Steve, you'd probably be like, whoa, what the hell is happening here? And that is kind of terrifying to think about, that people who don't know how to read the context of a Twitter joke maybe could completely pass over someone
Mhm.
because they've not read into sarcasm or anything like that. And people do talk to their friends in specific ways. I talk to friends on Twitter all the time, and I think that's something that I don't think about brands when I'm tweeting ever. It just doesn't occur to me to do that, because that wouldn't be authentic either. So that's definitely something I think is very much worth looking into, is the context of the conversations people are having. Like, are they actual fights or are they stupid tweets?
So
Yeah.
do that research, understand what they're
Mm.
actually
Yeah.
saying.
Mhm.
And there's a difference between being toxic and just purposefully combative, just to drive engagement or whatever, and just having a voice and having morals and wanting to speak on it. There's a lot of right now discussion on racial coded words, like aggressive and combative and things like that, where sometimes it's that's how a personality comes out. But look at the root of it. Is it coming out of a place of hurt? Is it coming out of a place of morals or racial justice or social justice, etc.? Or is it just coming out of like, I'm just out here to attack people and be toxic? So that's something to also really keep in mind. We need to be aware that this narrative of like just the politeness protocol isn't always the thing that should win out at the end of the day.
Right. And some of these influencers right now are really trying to use their platform to further causes that they believe in. And sometimes for brands that can be sensitive, but they're really trying to share a message with their audience.
Mhm.
Mm.
The thing that I'd love to mention for brands is I get I don't know what my following is, probably around 2 million across everything, and I get emails every day, multiple every day, from loads and loads of brands. So there is so much choice and so many options for me to say no, so many things for me to say no to. So if someone were to approach me and say something like, for the next 15 days you can't talk about Black Lives Matter, it wouldn't even be a question. No amount of money, because of the amount of things in my inbox and ethics, would ever make me consider that. Like, there are so many people trying to get at these influences all the time, that if you're too restrictive, or if you have especially things that limit social voices, which are so important, like people talking about any social justices, I'm just not going to work with you. You're competing for the attention and appeal of the influencers on a huge scale as well. Even though obviously that goes both ways, because there are so many influencers. But I think that's definitely worth considering. It's like, the more limitations you have, the easier it is for me to be like, I don't want to do this many sponsorships in 1 week because that's too many for my audience. Get rid of that one. Like, it's really not a tough thing to say no.
That's
Yeah, I
great.
think
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we've seen kind of a shift in like, brands having to be more understanding of, the influencers, because, back, I would say maybe a year ago, we had to be very safe on, being brand safe. But now, since a lot of stuff that's going on in the world, influencers want to talk about that with their audience to make sure that they're trying to have a better impact on the world. So I have seen brands that have shifted and understood that, like, what, social issues are important, and, we have to maybe lay back and not feel like we have to like kind of quiet this person down on what they're saying. So I do like that, because I think it is important, because we all like have a platform to talk about this kind of stuff. So why not use it?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
The influencers are more than just a brand. They
Yeah.
are a person at the end
Mhm.
of the day. And it's important to remember that. I have to get everyone out of here. We're going to do one last question, okay? And this is like lightning round. We're going to make it fast because I know everyone's got to get back to what they're doing today. Last parting advice. and maybe any tools that you would recommend someone who's just starting out on their journey in working with influencers. And let's go ahead and go from Alana, Brandon, Clara, and we'll finish with Mike.
From the influencer's perspective, I've been in the space for a really long time. My biggest piece of advice is to make sure that you are genuine. Everything you do is genuine. Stick to yourself. Like, don't say things you don't believe in. If a brand gives me language that I can't say, like, sorry to overshare, but I was sponsored by Tampax and they asked me to talk about having periods, which I don't have. So I was like, this is in the language. I can't say this. If you don't want to work with me because I've had to specify that thing, then that would suck. But they were like, okay, we're not going to make you say that. That would be super inauthentic and potentially harmful to an audience to pretend that everyone naturally does despite any health issues. So essentially, I think like just really be true to yourself. Don't say things you don't believe. Don't say you like a product if you don't like it. Any of that language, I will not say. I will not say this is the best place for this if I don't genuinely believe that. So for influencers, it's all about being authentic. And therefore, I think for the brands, it's about letting the influencers be authentic.
Thank you.
I guess
Brandon?
yeah. So I would say for developers, hiring someone who knows the space is very important, and speaking the language with influencers is super important. And definitely looking at marginalized communities, because there's a lot of people who do have the skills and what it takes, and to look at that, and to making sure that like, being genuine and understanding what you're wanting and having your expectations, that you can't just try to have like a small budget and try to get the biggest streamer or the biggest YouTuber. That's probably not going to work. So being open to opening up a budget and making sure that you try to make expectations happen for both the influencer and yourself.
Thank you, Brandon. Clara?
Yes, engage early, engage often. I say, this is probably the first panel I've ever been part of where I made it through without saying this line. I say every single time, this is a relationships industry, so start building them. And if that's not something that's your strength, which it's not for a lot of people, that's why we have jobs, get someone who can do it, whether it's contracting them or putting them on retainer or what have you. If you want to talk to an agency, talk to them early. You don't have to pay them right away, but consult early, months in advance of your next major beat. And then you can start, doing the billing and everything about a month or two out from when you actually, the activations are going to hit. And the difference, I know a lot of people have this question, is how do you get the attention of an influencer? Like through email, they don't answer me. The difference is the relationship. Because as Alana said, I'm a Pico influencer myself. And even I get 40 emails a day from devs. 40 emails a day.
Anything you would DM me about, because it's you at this point, I would want to do it. Like any game that you work on, like you DM me anything and I'd be like, I want to 100% I know what games she reps and I love her. Like so that's how good you are at relationships and how important it is that you could be like $500 and I'd be like, it's Clara. We'll do it.
That is a vote of confidence.
I would never do that. But yes. And then I think lastly is like, it's so important to think about early influencer marketing, that one of the mistakes that I hear is devs assuming that their game is automatically content friendly. So get that consultation early on and let people play your game to give you the right advice.
Very important.
Yeah.
Mike, what do you think?
So I think one note on the creator side, it's like know what you create and why you create, and be able to define that, because the brand or the developer isn't going to know you as well as you know you. And I think that's really important. And that goes into the developer side, which is saying, know why you're working with an influencer, know what the goals are going to be and what the conversion funnel is. A lot of times brands will say, oh, I want to work with an influencer, they're going to do X amount of downloads. I'm like, an influencer is part of your conversion funnel, it's part of your marketing campaign. It will go alongside your own content, your own marketing paid spend. Like if someone goes to like a stream and clicks on a link to the website and the website sucks, your conversion is not going to happen. It's not the influencer's fault. So you really got to understand, like, tactically, why are you working with an influencer? And if you are you working with them in a way that is complementing what makes them unique and where your company is at that time, figuring out what that mechanism is, and then qualitatively looking at the pieces around it and making sure the context is right. And that's when a campaign works well for everybody and it performs. And when you miss those steps, that's when it falls apart. So like, I think that perspective is super critical for the developers.
I could listen to Mike talk about this all day. Like, all of you are so brilliant. Holy smokes, what an incredible panel. I want to do one more shout out to the Xsolla Diamond Club. If you want to participate in more speaker series like this, more sessions, they are offered for free right now. You can see the link down below. That's going to be Xsolla, XSOLLA .live/DC. That's where you can sign up. I also want to give another big shout out to all of the incredible panelists today. Thank you so much for setting aside your time today. If people want to follow up with you, if they want to follow your careers, your stories, your expert advice, I want to let everyone know where they can follow you. So, Alana, where can people find you online?
I laugh every time. It's at Charalanazad across everything, which is my name in the middle of Charizard. Nobody knows how to spell it. That's okay.
At Sherlanazard.
Basically.
Perfect. And you can find that on the Xsolla Twitter account. She should be tagged in there. Brandon, where can we find you?
Yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at I am Brandon TV. If you go to my website, iambrandon.tv, you can see all my stuff and things there. And there's like a little email box where you can email me if you have any questions about anything there.
Perfect. Thank you. Clara, where can people find you?
At Seriously Clara on Twitter and Twitch. Don't ask me why that I have no good origin story. It's so unoriginal. But you can find me there. Yeah, reach out whenever.
Thank you. And Mike, let's wrap it up with you. Where can people find you?
Just at Mike Prasad is my name on almost every platform out there. And also Mike at tinysponsor.com. Happy to help out and talk with anyone who would like to.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for coming out today. I hope everyone enjoyed this.
Thank you
Take
so
care,
much.
everyone.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
me.
Cricket.
coming.